Prime wasn't covering the people that these boys are covering either. He's in an era where he's a fucking alien or somebody from the future that was dropped off in the wrong time.
But he could come in this time and
yeah, because he can ball in this time. That's what I'm saying. Like, the receivers from back then.
Might not be Prime, though.
What he going to be?
Oh, shit. I'm just saying. He got a lot of people. He got a lot of guys. He got to line up every week.
Every week.
Yeah, I get it.
Elite wide receiver.
I get it, but shit.
These guys that he played against weren't that fast, bro. Like,
I don't know. Though,
they were stronger, but they weren't that fast. These guys, no. They big, they fast, they can jump.
Are you shitting me? Why do you talk on a microphone? Why do you have a microphone? What the hell are you talking about? I don't even know your name. And I certainly don't know your game. When I won championships on every level. On every level. When they can knock niggas out. I call passes in the midst of pain. Y'all don't do that. Y'all ain't never had to do that. So shut the hell up.
All right, so boom. This clip has gone viral on social media where Michael Irvin went off on this podcaster for making a claim that Deion Sanders probably wouldn't be as great or he would struggle week to week in today's generation playing against today's wide receivers solely because the wide receivers of the 90s either A, weren't as elite on a week-to-week basis, or B, they're simply not fast enough. Now, in the clip, you can hear two different voices. Well, it's three people, so essentially you hear three voices. But there's two different voices that are making the prominent points. For one, the gentleman who Michael Irvin went off on, and the other dude who said, well, every single week it's an elite receiver. That guy who's bald, that's Brandon Jacobs. Two-time Super Bowl winning running back for the New York Giants, Brandon Jacobs, making the claim that every single week is an elite wide receiver. Now, I'll say this much. I think everything got blown out of proportion for sure. Michael Irvin and this gentleman probably don't need to sit down and have a conversation, but I think what Michael probably should have done was actually watch the entirety of the conversation, because I had to go and tune into the podcast to get proper context, if you will, of what the convo was about. And essentially the whole base point was, do you think there should be another level or a second floor or an upper room in the Hall of Fame to differentiate between who were the, as Skip Bayless once said, Hall of Famers of the Hall of Famers.
So who should be on the top floor? Deion, LT, Joe Montana, Tom Brady, people like that.
Jerry Rice got
Jerry Rice.
Who should be on the bottom floor? Because
that's what I'm saying.
You got three floors, right? Prime them up top. Then you got the second level of people like who?
Larry Fitzgerald, Randy Moss. See Randy
what?
Moss.
I'm just saying, but it should be tiers.
I think you can end it after T.O. when it comes to the receivers.
To the top.
Yeah, Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, and T.O. What other receiver deserve to be up there with them three?
On that level, you saying?
Yeah, what other receiver?
Michael Irvin should be on the second floor.
I'm a Cowboy fan, and I ain't gonna.
He's not all that, huh?
Not with them boys.
Now, for one, not to step so far away from the whole premise of the conversation here, we're talking about Hall of Famers at the end of the day. These are the greatest of all time. Now, all of a sudden, you're trying to rank between who's the greatest of the greatest, right? But when you're talking about different sort of tiers, I think, yes, it's objective that you can say certain players are better than others. However, what's the context and the criteria, I should say, of how you're going to judge these particular players? Because if you're talking about winning, then of course it's Michael Irvin next to Jerry Rice, because those are the two most accomplished wide receivers. You could even throw in a Lynn Swann, a John Stallworth as well, because when we're talking about rings, we got to take into account who won at the highest level. Of course, in Michael Irvin's case, he won at every level. So it's a situation in which that's got to be considered as well. If this is just a pure production kind of thing, you're just looking at the raw numbers alone, now you introduce people like a Larry Fitzgerald into that upper room of upper rooms, if you will. But that's neither here nor there. The topic of the conversation was regarding Deion Sanders, and you heard the claim that, well, guys back in the day weren't running as fast as they are in today's day and age.
People, they don't think it's hate coming from me, but like, I'm sorry, I believe in evolution, bruh. Prime wasn't covering the people that these boys are covering either.
Who is these boys?
Man, everybody, all these boys.
You gotta line up every week.
Every week. Every team got a dude or two that will bust your ass. Prime was a superior.
He could still
This
ball in it though.
Prime is like Jordan to me. What I mean by that is he's in an era where he's a fucking alien or somebody from the future that was dropped off in the wrong time.
But he could come in this time and
Yeah,
still
because
ball.
he can ball in this time. That's what I'm saying. Like the receivers from back then.
Might not be Prime though.
Who he gonna be?
Oh shit!
He said,
I'm
what
just
he
saying. He got a lot of people. He got a lot of guys. He got to line up every week.
Every week.
Yeah, I
Against
get
an
it.
Elite wide receiver.
I get it, but shit.
These guys that he
elite
played
form.
against weren't that fast, bro. Like
I don't know though.
they were stronger, but they weren't that fast. These guys now, they big, they fast, they can jump. I would have loved to have seen him play against certain guys.
Like who?
I'd love to see him. I would have loved to see him play against Chad in his prime. I would have loved to see him play against Justin Jefferson right now today. You know, all these different guys. I would love to see him cover Tyreek.
Yeah.
You know, just to see what would happen. If Prime is who we think he is, but you can't fault a man for playing in the era that they played in.
Now, yes, there is some truth to Deion Sanders being somewhat of an alien, right? Because there's a guy who played 2 professional sports at a high level at the same time, could play on both sides of the football, making plays for a decade long, right? Hall of Famer of Hall of Famers. However, when you're talking about just speed, there was always fast guys in the NFL. Bullet Bob Hayes in the 60s and the 70s. You had your Darrell Green, who played in the same era as Deion Sanders, right? You have your Bo Jacksons, who unfortunately his career ended up getting cut short, but Bo Jackson played in that very same era as well. I think where the issue that Irving took to the statement was, when you're talking about, oh, would he still be prime, right? And Brandon Jacobs was the one who said, oh, well, prime probably could play in today's era, but would he still be prime time? Essentially insinuating at, would you still be the greatest of all time in today's era? When you make a statement like that, you're essentially shitting on the receivers of yesteryear by saying that they're not as great as today's era. And that's just simply could not be further from the truth, because Deion played against the greatest wide receiver of all time in Jerry Rice. Truly, I think it's an objective truth. Jerry's the greatest of all time. Well, he utilized Stickum. He's the greatest of all time, right? Randy Moss may be the greatest athlete to have played wide receiver. Maybe you could say Calvin Johnson is the greatest crafted human body to go out there and play wide receiver. But from a production standpoint, a winning standpoint, and all things encompassing as it pertains to playing wide receiver, nobody was better than Jerry Rice. And you take into account the other wide receivers of that era. You have your Michael Irvin. You have your Sterling Sharps who play. And they had a couple of guys who were in the 90s that have half of their careers in there. A Marvin Harrison and Isaac Bruce, Terrell Owens. Randy Moss was towards the tail end, right? But you have your Andre Risons, your Andre Reeds as well, your Irving Fryers. You have all of these different guys who played in the 90s, put up crazy numbers, right? Hall of Famers. And essentially what you're saying is, oh, well, if Deion played against the Justin Jeffersons, the Jamar Chases, the Amon-Ra St. Browns, the Tyreek Hills, the Devontae Adams, the DeAndre Hopkins, the Antonio Browns, the Mike Evans, the Julio Jones, the Larry Fitzgerald, if he played against the guys, the Chad Johnsons, all of these different dudes, Steve Smith, Andre Johnson, Donald Driver, Hines Ward, Reggie Wayne, all these different dudes in the 2000s. I know I'm missing people, so people in the comment section can throw in those other guys. I'm not trying to not mention people, but it's very difficult to remember all these doggone names, whatever the case may be, right? They're elite players at every single level. It's very difficult to have the conversation about greatest of all time and if they could play in different eras, because you also have to take into account the differences around the entirety of the sport and life in those different eras. That's why I've always said countless different times, whether it's been on live streams, whether it's been in videos, whether it's been in commentary, you can't take somebody from the current day and age, bring them backwards, and they would be better back in the day than they are now, because you have to take into account that you're not getting paid as much. You don't have as much visibility. The sports science isn't caught up to what it is now. Medical is nowhere near what it is now. If you tear your ACL in the 1970s, in the 80s, it's incredibly difficult to go and make a resurgence. In today's day and age, it's almost common practice. You tore your ACL. He'll be back next year. There's no guarantee you would be back. You tear your Achilles, that's your career. It's over. So all these different things have to be taken into account. You take anybody from the past, in my opinion, this could be subjective, but in my opinion, you take anybody who played in yesteryear and you drop them in today's game, I think you get better because you have the benefit of having the medical that's there. Financially, you have much more incentive that's there as well. And then furthermore, you're learning more as you're learning the game as a youth, getting to adulthood. It's not just take somebody, pluck them out of their era, drop them into a different era, and then everything that you learn comes with you. If you take somebody from today's day and age, you take a Justin Jefferson, you take a Jamar Chase, you take them and you drop them in the 80s, everything you learned about football to get to the level that you're at now, you have to now learn with what the tools with the people of yesteryear had. This is a part of the conversation that people always lose because they just hypothetically just want to take somebody, pluck them into a different era. It just don't work like that. It don't work like that.
Deion could play in this era and in any era. And all these jokers you call top corners today ain't Deion Sanders. If they're playing today, they are not Deion Sanders. I would love to see your top corner right now and the things I would do to your top corners in this league right now. They think they are physical. They know not about being physical. I would be way more physical than them. I ain't gotta outrun them. This is not a fucking track meet. This is a football game. You play corner, your job is to cover me, and it will not be possible. There's more to the game than line it up, pew, and run it.
Michael Irvin also made a very good point in the midst of his rant as well regarding the difference in physicality in the game in yesteryear as well, because you really could hit offensive players, primarily wide receivers. You were punished for running slants. It was a business decision to go out there and run slants. Nowadays, you could do that all day. And guess what? When you get lit up, you gonna see a flag get thrown onto the field. The whistle's gonna get blown. That's 15-yard penalty immediately. Back in the day, that's standard practice. You come across the middle in the 80s, Jack Tatum's taking your helmet off. And guess what? You're going right back to the huddle. You gotta deal with that. Here come Ronnie Lott. Take it to the 90s. Here comes Atwater. Take it to the 2000s. Here come Palomalu, Reed, Dawkins. However you wanna throw out there, Cam Chancellor in the 2010s. Nowadays, there's no real enforcers like that on defense because it's no longer incentivized to be that. If you're somebody who's essentially what you deem a crash out on defense, you're a liability now because you're ultimately going to penalize your team and your defense because you're going to be racking up penalties. You're going to be expendable. Back in the day, you wanted and needed those guys on your team. And that's just simply not going to be the case in today's era. And that's also something that got to be taken into account. Somebody who every single game, the play style, no matter what the defense is doing, they show up and they show out. And it's a different sort of league. It's a passing league now. These numbers are incredibly inflated. In today's day and age, sports fans are nothing more than box score watchers. You watch the highlights, you don't watch the entire game. You look at the box score, you have no idea of the context of what it is that you look at. You can see a receiver have 10 catches for 120 yards. Another receiver have 3 catches for 230 some yards. You're like, oh man, that dude went off, right? Granted, both of them had magnificent games. But in one game, that 10 catches for 120 some yards, you could have been eating up the defense every single series, cooking them left and right. The other one, you could have a busted coverage where you just wide open, drop it into breadbasket, you run to the end zone. Busted coverage. If the defense ain't do their job, you could just walk into the end zone. A random person off the street could be able to take advantage of a busted coverage. Of course, it's going to be very difficult to go out there and at an elite level put on a performance, but anybody on a busted coverage, oh, well, it's a cover 2. The other goddamn safety decides not to go and take the deep third. They're going to step up. All of a sudden, nobody's deep. You just got to catch it and run to the end zone. Anybody can score on something like that. But if you don't have the full context of what went into the different sort of plays, that's just speaking on a fan perspective watching the game. You're just going to look at the stats and say, oh, well, this person's better than that person, or this person had a better day than that person. So context matters, and I think that gets lost in translation left and right. Overall, regarding playmaker Michael Irvin and this particular gentleman, I just think it's a situation in which the verbiage wasn't the best. I thought it was crazy that Brandon Jacobs, was saying what it was that he was saying, albeit it's just regular barbershop talk. You have these sort of conversations, not to be a slight on anybody, but ultimately you would take offense if you're somebody who played in a generation at the highest level, reached the highest of heights, and all of a sudden somebody's on some, today's game is so much better than when you played, and the players of today are so much better. Like, if you really think about it, when you start talking about top receivers, and this is just in Michael Irvin's case, you start talking about like top 5, top 10 receivers of all time, Michael Irvin be getting left off the list. Because people will look at the numbers like, oh, well, you only had this amount of I think he's in like the 700 to 800 range. Of course, he's over the 10,000 mark. I think he's about like 11, 12, maybe 13,000 in that area. But with the touchdowns, he never passed the 70 touchdowns, right? So you got guys like Mike Evans, who's in the hundreds, Devontae Adams, who's in the hundreds. You got Brandon Marshall, who's in the 80s. Antonio Brown, I think he's in the 80s or just at 80. Calvin Johnson's got, so you have a bunch of people who's like, well, who was really scoring like that? Des Bryant scored more touchdowns. But if you take a look at why they call Michael Irvin the playmaker, you'll see. All I got to say is just people got to stop shitting on players of yesteryear, especially those who have those jackets, as Deion Sanders would say, jackets they ain't buy. You a Hall of Famer, you got to give them their respect, period. Albeit today's day and age, now all of a sudden they starting to have conversations about guys who were good, maybe very good, borderline great, never greatest when they played, getting conversations of possibly making it into the Hall of Fame. But that doesn't take away from the greatest who done it in their era. We just got to be very, very, very careful in the midst of these conversations, because again, I understand it's subjective to a degree when you be talking about players who are great, but once you start talking about, man, I don't know if this person would be as good in today's day and age as they were back in the day, you also got to take into account, you're saying who they played against were not as good as today's day and age. Because let's just look at the contemporaries regarding cornerbacks, right? In Deion's era in the 90s, because if you take a step away from the 80s, but you take a look at like the 90s, you have Darrell Green that's there, you got Rod Woodson that's there, Aeneas Williams that's there, Eric Allen that's there, right? And then take into account how many of the great cornerbacks in today's game could measure up to those guys. Because week in, week out, they were showing up, shutting shit down, taking the football away left and right. In today's game, how many Hall of Fame cornerbacks are currently playing right now? You got some defensive player of the years. I think Stephon Gilmore's out the league right now, and he's since passed it. He fresh out the laundromat. That brother washed. But still a hell of a doggone player, right? But you've got your Patrick Surtains, of course, reigning defensive player of the year. You got Jalen Ramsey, who's still playing at a very high elite level. And then who else do you have who's playing cornerback currently right now who you can say is the trajectory is the Hall of Fame? Right? You got some guys taking the football away left and right, but shutting folks down week after week, you don't see that on average. A lot of times it's just rotational guys who maybe you have a good season here, but you're not as consistent after that. Sauce Gardner fell from grace, in my opinion, from the rookie season up until now. He's still a very good cornerback, but enough to say, man, he passes the eye test to be a Hall of Fame. So all these different things have to be taken into a conversation when you're having these sort of, discussions of great players and comparing them to the players of yesteryear. But overall, Michael Irvin had a legendary rant. And truly, I just think we have to do a better job as sports fans when having discussions about sports. The moment that you hear somebody say something that is absolutely nonsensical and, for lack of a better term, idiotic as it pertains to certain players being better than others, just don't engage in conversation. Just move on. Have conversations with folks who actually know sports, and they're not going to say something stupid. Not to say that that particular podcast is, dumb, because he cleaned it up. I listened to the entire episode. It wasn't as if he was trying to shit on folks. However, it did end up coming out with that bit of an undertone. But y'all let me know what y'all think about the entirety of the discussion down in the comment section below. But I got to agree with Michael Irvin. Folks is really sleeping on the people in his era. They really sleeping on.
Can't sit here and just start calling them trash and all that. That's what I'm talking about. When it was greats, we call them trash now. Shit like that. Like what I see on the internet is ridiculous.
People got to stop getting emotional about these type, but that's what make it so interesting. People are super emotional about it. It's all because you want to sit up here and take two players that are great, because I think LeBron, Kobe, Jordan, all of them are great. Why do we got to tear LeBron down to boost Jordan up, and why we got to tear Jordan down to boost LeBron up? That's
what
crazy.
I'm saying.
I don't mind you being stupid. I don't mind you being dumb, but you will not put my name in it. You will not put my game in it. You will not put my legacy in it, and you will not put Deion in that shit. Talk what you know, or shut the fuck up.
Hey, I appreciate you watching the entire video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and the like button on the way out if you haven't already. And on top of that, hit that notification bell as well. For whatever reason, YouTube's only showing my videos to 20% of my subscribers. So if you have already turned on the notification bell, turn it off, turn it back on. If you never turn it on, turn it on. I appreciate you.